Welcome back to the Zero State Podcast. Today we sit down with Stephen James, founder of Apex Sanitization Systems. Stephen is an engineer who sees opportunities where others see limitations, and in part one of our two-part series, he shares how he uses creativity, experimentation, and persistence to build high-volume sanitization solutions that are changing the ITAD industry. Enjoy.
They just don't know that my critical thinking's on an epic level.
There it is.
And that's a lot of what I do when I look at stuff. Even if it's not tailored to work, I'm like, how can I make that better? And every time you can pull a human step out of the loop and make the machine record record what happened, automatically per device, tamper evident. You just didn't speed things up. You made the whole operation trustworthy.
I am excited for another episode of our Zero State Podcast. This has been a great platform and a great place to get to know some great people. Today, I get to talk with Stephen James. I'm excited about it. He's been a longtime friend and associate of the industry of mine, and I think the timing's really interesting. We're going to talk a bit about him and really the hardware around how you test and refurbish and do things, and how one comes up with some ways of doing that. As WipeOS has been very creative and instrumental in making a lot of wiping rigs and wiping labs and full testing stations and really, the backbone of a lot of ITADs and refurbishing outfits. It's still one of those things I think of as a little bit of the Wild West in a lot of ways, because we're still making it up as we go in most places, but there are some people out there who get it. So like I said, I've got Stephen James here. He's an engineer who can custom design all kinds of hardware. He's done a lot in the ITAD world. When he's not out off-roading or performing in his rock band, you might find out there's some interesting stuff he's testing and cooking up, and I think that's never been more true than it is today. So excited to have you here, Stephen. How are you, sir?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yeah, it's definitely, with your background and your experience, again, I think it's really neat to be able to have this platform and get into things. So I'm going to try and have some fun with you today, not keep it too serious. I know you've kind of done a lot creatively, a creative person, unique guy, and so we'll kind of get into some of that. But yeah, before we dive into kind of the hardware stuff, I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's a Saturday look like? What are you usually getting into on your free time?
Well, usually spend time with my family and my dogs. I'm into outdoor stuff, camping, mudding, off-roading. I do a little bit of studio engineering. I'm a drummer. So, and then other than that, I'm designing technology. I don't really have free time. I'm always doing one of those things.
Yeah, well, so there's no shameless plug for any new band or maybe an old band or anything you want to throw out
Only in my dreams.
there? I will just say it was really cool first getting to know you, and there was that album you shared with me on USB, and I have some of that background myself. I used to do some things in the hip hop scene, and it's funny as you get older, you kind of look back at some of that stuff, and it's the best, man. It's so much fun to create things and to have that. And what I'm already telling my kids is like, that stuff in a good way, it never goes away. The art you create, the stuff you kind of put that energy into, it's really fun as you get older. Sometimes it's mostly embarrassing, but still really fun to, take a look at that and have fun with that. Well, what's one thing that people are kind of surprised to learn about you,
Probably that I do all those things.
Yeah.
I'm not limited to one thing. I like being in more than one thing. I like more than one direction. Thinking outside the box. I'm always thinking about how to improve stuff, and they just don't know that my critical thinking's on an epic level.
There it is.
And that's a lot of what I do when I look at stuff. Even if it's not tailored to work, I'm like, how can I make that better?
And I feel like that's like a dying art, or a thing that, I mean, again, maybe I'm just sounding older and it's one of those kids these days sort of things, but I feel like it's rare these days, right? To kind of look
Mhm.
at something instead of just going, well, it is that way, it's been built that way. You kind of look at it
Right.
and go, okay, that's what it is in its current state. What else can we, make with it? Where else can it go? And I think that's why you and I have definitely gotten along. I mean, that's one thing that keeps me excited with the work we do on the software side is, there's always some new idea, some new improvement, some way to
Right.
automate things, and it's not easy to just make those things happen. I mean, you got to get other people around you, right, to understand it, appreciate it, and then kind of make things happen. So when you see an
Yeah.
opportunity like that, like what is that process like for you? I mean, when you see something, hey, I know I can build that, do that. Do you go kick in the door of the CEO and say, hey, I got to do this? Do you just start doing it? How's that go?
And when I see that, it's already started in my head automatically. But one thing I wanted to touch on before that is, the one main thing that catches people off guard about me is I don't have an engineering degree. I actually have a master's in cybersecurity, which is totally different from what I do. But I believe that helped me with understanding of hardware going in all the way up to my cybersecurity degree. That which helped me be an engineer because everything I know I taught myself. I broke a lot of stuff. I rebuilt it. I've broken it again and built it better. And that's my school.
Well, even and kind of thinking about that too. I mean, if you can think about maybe one of your first sort of biggest projects that you've done or bigger projects that I know you did something for like a phone testing setup or some other kind of rigs like that. I mean, what was kind of an example of something that you've kind of built and used in this space?
So the first thing that I ever built was a hard drive sanitation station, which did 288 drives simultaneously. And the design of it took me a little bit, and how we wanted to achieve this, because I hadn't seen anything on the market anywhere that I could get any ideas from, or hey, you can try this or that. AI definitely wasn't around like it is prevalently now. Went back in 2017, 2018 when I started building the machine. So definitely, it definitely was a challenge, especially learning how to do power and calculating power and understanding the requirements needed. That was my biggest challenge initially with
Well, it's
building that
funny
machine.
because yeah, a lot of our users, a lot of my experience, because we've done the bring your own hardware setup at least for hard drives and things again. But there's definitely the square peg, square hole sort of mentality. If it fits, or if I can even slam it into that slot some way, it should work, right? And it's like,
Correct.
when you get behind the scene and you're on the back end of it, especially working with developers and such that are going, here's what, this device was plugged into, and this is what this was designed for. Again, the power ratings, just the configurations, the form factors and all of it. It's funny because I'm guilty both ways. I can admit that. Like if I want to try and get something done, I might just kind of shove it in there and see what happens. And then I quickly think about it for a second and go, okay, wait a minute. This NVMe was never gonna work in a
Right.
SATA slot, But so and it's funny because I always want to see kind of I've seen some pictures of the stuff that you've kind of built and you shared some cool things with me. And I think it's hard to really kind of understand until you've seen it. I think what we're referring to in these kind of different builds. So again, I mean, I know you've done stuff for like phone system testing, right? Other stuff besides drives, right? You've done a bunch of different types of
Right.
hardware. So when you've done some of that, I mean, is it really just I see it and I'm thinking about it and I just build it and go? Do you sit down and is there a lot of math or kind of technical stuff looked at, or is it just kind of square peg, square hole, kind of make it work?
Okay. You want to know my process of it?
That's
Okay.
what I'm getting at a little
So
bit. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I accept, that there is that it can be done. Um, that's the mindset that I stay in. There's always a way in. The manufacturer, they didn't want you to find a way in, but so I start with what the device needs to come alive, and not what the manual says or about what anybody else says half the time. Actually, what's needed is power, some kind of signal, a handshake or something. Once I figure that out, everything else just making it happen cleanly over and over for a person who's not an engineer. I'm sure people that have been to school for engineering, they might have a certain process of attacking things, but mine starts at power, and I work my way back all the way to how the user is going to be using the machine.
Well, and I can assume the folks that did get the formal education that do know their stuff inside and out from an engineering perspective, that could also be a problem, right? Because I know working with engineers on the software side, sometimes they know a little too much about how things work, and I'll put it this way, they get a little over their skis, right? Get their heads kind of ahead of themselves and assuming a lot of things and why things can't technically work, as opposed to if you're a little less formally taught those things, you might just be a little more comfortable, just trying it and not assuming that. And I don't want to say getting
Right.
lucky, but there's probably some luck involved, right? You kind of
Right.
try it and hope, you're
Yeah,
hoping it
yeah,
works
you
and it
cross your
works.
fingers and it happens, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, which
So,
again is kind of another lost kind of art, I think, in our modern culture a lot of ways. Like, people, and again, I'm guilty too. If you assume you want somebody who is the complete expert to do whatever task you're looking for, and again, all the information is available if you dig and do a little bit of your own research. I mean, there's not really that many secrets out there these days, at least from a technical perspective. um,
right.
well, so it sounds like, I mean, your main focus has been obviously in the ITAD world, trying to find ways to move as much equipment in as much of an automated way as possible, right? That's kind of always been your main
Right.
focus. Um, so when you're building systems that kind of have to, uh, survive and be used for thousands of devices, I mean, are you thinking more about how tough the machine needs to be or how easy it needs to be for the user? I mean, how do you kind of make those two worlds come together?
Well, so since I built my first machines, I've had 6 years or more to sit back, and I've sit back and watched at the end of the day where nobody could see me, and watch how users use it at the end of the day. Because biggest problems with machines is users, and how are they going to use it at the end of the day when they've worked 8 hours and they're tired, and it's a repetitious thing. Are they slamming stuff in there, or you know are doing the following the certain process that you have? It's the processes. Have you made it intuitive to where it's that easy for them to follow? That plays a big role in that, in designing that kind of stuff, as
Have
much
you,
as power
yeah,
or anything else.
I was gonna say, have you made anything that as soon as you got it into anybody's hands, it just fell apart, or they just beat it up? They weren't quite as
No,
careful
but
with as they should be.
I have created recently GPU testers to test multi like 8 at a time,
Nice.
and I actually displayed it on my LinkedIn recently for everybody to take a look at. And those got PCI slots in there that you put the cards into, so you want to minimize somebody slamming the cards in there. It's a sensitive device. Now, since then, for my new stuff, I've gotten past that, and add PCI extenders, so that way, if that gets trashed, you're just replacing the extender, not the actual whole board, because you can't
Yeah.
replace the slot on there.
Yeah, and I think what's great about you being able to kind of take some of this, uh, create some of this focus. I think most of the folks I know, especially again in the ITAD world, they may get an hour or two most in a year to maybe think about, how they're building out their hardware and how they're maintaining that. And it just becomes something that is always rushed. It's always, an afterthought. And then you really step back. And when I've done site visits and things, I'm amazed that, some of these folks are wiping hard drives in a server that's been doing it for 15 years, and the thing somehow
Hmm.
still turns on, and it's a workhorse, but it's also like, hey, maybe there's time to pump the brakes a little bit, and we update some of that, um, which we've definitely helped with too, and it's fun. For me, I like this hardware side. I think I've been lucky because one of our lead developers who he was one of those guys that had, and I only picture this from how he describes it, but the wall at home with all the little chips, the little, how they do like the rolls of chips, and then they have the little plastic, I forget what they're called, but they're just the little chip containers. And he's got a wall
Right.
of them. So he can go ahead and grab the one he needs, solder it on the board, and build himself whatever board with whatever kind of thing he wants to do.
Right.
And that was fun. That was a hobby for him before he got in the software world, which is super unique, right? Most of the software guys do not know hardware that way. Vice versa, a lot of hardware guys don't understand the ones and zeros of software. So it's been really neat to learn from that. And again, that's where you and I kind of have connected about, a lot of things in the ITAD space specifically. So getting back into kind of the ITAD conversation, the near and dear part of this whole our conversation in this show. Basically, there's a lot of talk about automation in ITAD, trying to reduce the human intervention and complicating things that way. I mean, are there some obvious or where do you see some potential opportunities for automation in ITAD?
Well, I say the biggest one part nobody wants to talk about, because it's boring, is handling and the picking up and putting down. That's where all the errors happen, and that's where labor cost lives. And it's not about speed. The real win is audibility. And as far as the stuff that I've been going through, it's because what actually hurts ITAD isn't the slowing down process; it's the chain of custody question in the ITAD field. And to prove exact drive got wiped or nobody swapped it, nobody fudged the log. Right now the human reading is a screen and typing into a spreadsheet. Humans mistype. They fudge stuff up. Sometimes they lie. And every time you can pull a human step out of the loop, can make the machine record what happened. Automatically per device, tamper evident. You just didn't speed things up. You made the whole operation trustworthy, and that's the real issue that really ITADS needs to tackle right now. A lot of companies are out there. They want chain of custody, want to make sure that that drive said that it was wiped, that it was really wiped, and they want to make sure that their data is secured if they're going to be reselling this stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think what I'm starting to see a lot more as well is, I mean, at least the idea around on-site services, and doing data destruction on site, or what I always kind of personally feel is a revolution in our space, we'll say, is instead of shredding drives first chance you get, how about you just wipe them and use them for a bit longer, or wipe them and then shred them for better records, and it's
Right.
funny. Anytime I talk to, executive level folks that are making those decisions, they get it, they love it, but it's a slow, long, they've had a policy on the books. People get nervous about changing some of those security policies and some of that. But yeah, the chain of custody and kind of making sure everything's accounted for, it just still is amazing to me, because sometimes it's the biggest companies or the three-letter agencies that we trust the most or think are the most strict that they just kind of get loose with some of this stuff, frankly. They just kind of say, well, we've got a partner, a vendor, they're a big name, everybody, they've got a good reputation, and that is something that's valid, but it still doesn't make me believe that there aren't some nefarious actors along the way, there aren't some mistakes made that aren't intentional. Either way, it's not an airtight process, I don't think, in most
Yeah, I
systems.
can tell you that that one mistake that happens could be the end of your business, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we've seen it. A lot of us in the ITAD world have seen some of these companies get hung up to dry and get some, you know, publications, but it's not quite headlines that people care about, in the way they should, and it's not. Yeah, it's scary stuff, really, but it's just, it's one of those things that I think it continues to get better. Again, guys like us in the trenches here trying to make things a little bit better all the time. It is starting to show, it is starting to change. And I am hearing those things. Like I said, the conversations are happening much more to revisit the policies that that just have, liabilities, and try to figure out how to really get this closed down. I think on that note, I mean, we talked about it, I think, the other day, but what do you think about, like, because I know, like, a lot of the robotics sides of things, a lot of that's come down in costs, compared to how it was a decade ago. And so, I know a lot of different groups are in data center spaces are doing some things to have robots do the job instead of a human, and it's kind of like, well, that's where it begins, right? That's where they start their takeover.
Right. Well, it's closer than people think. I'll tell you that, because pick and place robots already handle smaller, more delicate stuff in electronics manufacturing currently. And the bottleneck's not the robot; it's the drives come in every shape and orientation, solve generalized part orientation, and this industry gets robotic overnight.
That's it. Yeah. Thanks again for coming on. And before we close out here, any words of wisdom or anything you'd like to share with the good folks?
Yeah. If they'd like to talk more about any of this, they can catch me at the ITAD Summit in Las Vegas, or they can go to our website. This is www.apex-itad.com.
There we
And
go.
for right now, we'll give them a little bit of we'll give them a little snack for right now, but it'll go live on August 4th, and then we'll give them the full course meal.
Oh man, exciting things coming. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on with us, and yeah, we look forward to the future working with you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.